Okay, we are live. What's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to our monthly Tech Talk for October 2014. This is our 15th Tech Talk, and this month we have tutorial team member and author Chris Lowe joining us, and he's going to be giving a talk on Xcode 6 tips and tricks. As iPhone developers, we use Xcode all the time, so it's really important to know how to get the most out of it, and that is what Chris will be covering today. He'll be giving us a lot of helpful tips and tricks about working efficiently in Xcode 6. It's a collection of tips both from Chris personally, and he also enlisted a bunch of tutorial team members on our site to contribute their tips as well. So I guarantee you'll learn something new. So here's today's schedule. First, Chris will give his tech talk on Xcode 6 tips and tricks, and then we will open things up to Q&A. So the way Q&A works is if you're watching this live, you can go ahead and ask your questions with the Q&A tool, and you can also upvote other people's questions. And in the Q&A period after Chris's talk, we'll go through in rough order of upvotes. So before we get started, I wanted to say a little more about Chris Lowe. Chris is a tutorial team member on our site, and as I mentioned, he's also a co-author of our new book, iOS 8 by Tutorials. Chris actually wrote 2 chapters in that book. The first chapter is an in-depth look at Xcode 6, which looks at some of the new features in Xcode 6 specifically, and he wrote a second chapter called Xcode 6 and Swift, which covers some of the more Swift-specific new features in Xcode 6. So Chris is the mobile tech lead at USAA by day, and by night he's a UI and iOS consultant at his own company, #Studios. When he's not doing iOS development, he spends time with his wife, his young daughter, and his 2 crazy dogs. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Chris for his tech talk on Xcode 6 tips and tricks. Chris?
Great. Thanks, Ray. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm really excited to kind of give this talk. Like Ray mentioned, I did 2 of the chapters in iOS 8 by Tutorials, learned a lot of great stuff about Xcode. We want to share kind of the things we learned, and as Ray mentioned, the things that the team has shared with us. So we'll just jump right into the presentation here. We're going to cover a lot of content today. We're going to cover. Can you guys see that okay?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect, thank you. So a lot of stuff we're going to cover today. First, we're going to go over some of the stuff in Xcode, which is more generic. It's not specific to Xcode 6, but things that really the team really felt were important to kind of improve your productivity of the day. So things like preferences and behaviors, plugins, code snippets, shortcuts. We'll deep dive into each one of these. We'll talk about Xcode 6 specifically, such as live view debugging and playgrounds. And then take a tour over to the iOS simulator, which has some really cool functionality that I don't think gets a lot of attention. So we'll first jump right into Xcode. So there's not going to be a lot of slides in this. We're going to be mostly in Xcode. And so what's important to know, right, is these are kind of the magic keys, right? Shift, Command, Option. A lot of people call them Alt as well. And then also the Control key is kind of the 4th pillar of that. So let's jump over to Xcode. This here. So I'm using the World Weather app from the iOS 8 by Tutorials. It's just a sample app, just as kind of a point of reference to get our point across. You can use any app, and I actually recommend if you can follow along at home, you can also fire up Xcode and follow along with us. So the first part we're going to go through is actually the preferences section. Let me see. Make sure you guys can still see this. There we go. Back to that. All right. So like I said, the first section is action preferences, and so a keyboard shortcut for anybody who's used the Mac for a long time, right? So Command, comma. On the right side, you can do Command, comma in 2 fingers. Brings up any OS X app preferences. So the first one I want to show is this issues navigator detail, which I think was a really nice tip that's a couple of the tutorial team members shared. The default is 3, and so what this looks like is if I come over here, for example, I put this warning in. This is a really long warning message meant to show that I can type really long messages. Well, so the problem is over here on the left side, you can see that it gets kind of cut off, right? So you bring up your preferences, and I can actually put this up to, let's say, 10 lines, and you can see everything gets wrapped nicely so that you don't actually have to jump most projects have more than one warning. You don't actually have to jump to each one. So that was a really nice one that we came across. The next one is in behaviors. This one doesn't get a lot of love, unfortunately. It came across in Xcode 6. I'm gonna touch briefly on it now, and then we'll be able to do a little bit deep dive later if we still have time. What behaviors does is for any action or an event that gets triggered in Xcode on the left side here, you can have it do something on the right side, right? So for example, let's say you start running your application, right? You can have it do a couple of, I would consider, mundane things, such as play a sound that you kicked off the build. But the more interesting ones are when you start to kind of scroll down, or even up here actually at the top for builds, for succeeds or fails. This one's really, really nice, where you can actually customize the view. So let's say I want to have a tab named debug view, or sorry, debug tab, debugging tab, in the active window, and I really want to be able to focus in on what's actually going wrong, right? So I definitely want to show the debugger. I want to show with my variables, and then I also want to show maybe my current editor, right? And so now what should happen is when I go back and I close this, and let's say I think if I define this again, right, and I run that again, we should see that this starts opening once it's finished running. There we go. Tab. Sorry, collapsed it back down here. So this I only have one tab open, but you can see my console, right, with my debug console and my variables. And so if I actually took this up to, let's say, a test case failed, I would have access to all my variables, my properties, and I could also do some LLDB debugging. So like I said, quick brief into that. We'll get back to that in just a little bit. Navigation is an important one. For me, let me show you guys this functionality. For me, this part's really annoying to me when I'm in full screen mode and I accidentally double click and you get this second screen. Quick little fix for that is over here at double click navigation. Use it as the same click. We'll always count it as keeping it in Xcode. One of our tutorial team members also shared that with us. So Matthias is a longtime tutorial team members with us, and he actually sent me a lot of good information on this fonts and colors section. It's really important, right, if you're going to be working in Xcode for several hours a day, right, especially if it's your full-time job, or just a couple hours if you're doing some part-time work, that you have a font and color selection that works really well for you. This is the default one, right? It works pretty well. But there's things that can get better, right? Dusk, you can kind of play through these. My favorite is Midnight, so this is what I always keep my code on because I do most of my development work at night. We'll show you a little bit in just a little bit how you can add your own. Presentation mode works really well, right, when you want to show other content. And what you can also do is, let's say you really like Midnight, but you want the font bigger. You like the font bigger presentation. So you can actually come into these, each one of them. Either do Command A to select all, or you can pick individual ones. You can come in here and you can set your own custom configurations. So you can kind of tweak it exactly to how you want it to function. Right, so I should have now. Let me quit Xcode so we can get back to that. There we go. Okay. So there we go. So you can see it gets really big, right? So you can kind of, like I said, focus on the things that make your productivity the best. That's it. And we're going to come back to this one when we get to our next section on plugins. The last one we want to show in here was the text editing, and just this one line here for show line numbers. A lot of the developers that I've coached and mentored over the years don't typically get into preferences. And kind of configure their workspace, especially some of the newer developers. And so this is a great piece to show, especially when you get debug consoles or crash logs. It tells you the line numbers. You want to be able to find that, right? So that's a great one to have. So quick trip right there for preferences. So let's move on to the kind of the next piece, which I think doesn't get a lot of attention still, and that's called Xcode plugins. A plugin is an extension of Xcode that adds features that don't come with Xcode out of the box. or there's some features that are really buried in Xcode that using a plugin can really surface it and make it a lot easier. One really great piece of functionality that's built into an Xcode plugin, let me bring it up here, is this plugin manager called Alcatraz. So what Alcatraz is it's a centralized repository, similar to what we have for like Homebrew for the command line, or PHP has a package manager. It really centralizes a lot of the work. You can kind of see the UI here. A lot of the work of plugins that people have done into one place that you can download straight through Xcode. Installing it is really simple. This is alcatraz.io. You really just run this command from terminal, and it installs it for you. Similarly, if you want to make your own Xcode plugins, they follow a structure very similar to CocoaPods when you want to add your own definitions. Yeah, and so one thing that came up in even the discussion between Alcatraz and CocoaPods is Alcatraz is meant for a package manager for Xcode, whereas CocoaPods is a dependency manager for your source code. So they definitely can both exist, and they both have their own purposes that you need. I've already installed it in Xcode, just running that command line prompt. Let me switch back here to presentation so you guys can see this easier. And so what happens is when you run and you install it, you restart Xcode, it shows up under Window as Package Manager. You can see over here Command-Shift-9. We'll bring it up real quick. This is what it looks like. And it's broken down into 3 main pieces of functionality, and they call it out on their website down here. Plugins, color schemes, and templates. And you can see that here you can filter by them, or you can select all. Now, two warnings I guess I want to put out here. One is not all the packages have been updated for Xcode 6. Alcatraz just links to them. They don't actually manage them. That's one of the features they're working on as an indicator for future updates to show you that. The other thing is that not all the plugins have been updated to work with Swift yet. So you'll notice I'm working in an Objective-C package here, and so that allows me to show you how this works, and then the packages and plugins are coming quickly online to support this. Some of them just aren't there yet. So Command-Shift-9 to bring this up, and there's 2 I want to highlight. One is the CocoaPods plugin. You can have integration directly into Xcode. So if you can come over here, you click this little button, and it's going to turn blue. Blue means it's installed. And if you notice, very similar if you played around with playgrounds in Xcode 6, we have this little eye icon. This will actually show you a preview of what it looks like in Xcode, so you can see what's happening there. So I installed that one. The other one I'm gonna install because I really like it is I'm gonna filter to one called KS image named. And with this one, let me uninstall it. You can click on it, uninstall, click it again to install. What this plugin is if you ever have the scenario where you're trying to use an image but you don't know what the name of it is, this will do an autocomplete for any image already in your package, and I'll show you what that looks like. So the last thing on this point here, you saw the eye shows you a preview. This link will take you out to that GitHub repo. So for example, this is a repository plugin repo on GitHub, so you can see exactly how the code works and install it from here. Best practice is after you install it, go ahead and quit Xcode, and then launch it again so it can pick up all the new settings. And I'll show you in here now under product. I have CocoaPods now. You do have to have your project workspace set up for CocoaPods, so that's why you see here this one's not highlighted. I can show you if I come over here into this one. That CocoaPods, it does the auto-detect CocoaPods, and I can install or check for outdated CocoaPods from here. So kind of if you're used to working with Eclipse, a lot of that package management has been now centralized within Xcode with this feature. So that's CocoaPods. Like I said, this allows you to do everything that you would normally do from the command line or from a repo directly in here. So this part is really great. The other piece that we installed was that KS image name. And so KS image name will look for, let's say I'm in my image assets folder. I'm in Texas, so I really want this this file from called Dallas, right? It's a bunch of images. You can see here what the image looks like. I really want to use that, but let's say I don't know where it is, or I can't remember the exact name of it. Let me take out that one I put in earlier. So I can come down here. Let's say in my image cell that I want to use, I want to define an image. I can say UI image / Dallas image, and then anytime now that I go to UI image and I do image name, it will automatically prompt me for all the images that are in my file, right? So you can see lightning, right? Let's say I want to do Dallas. You can see the image, preview, the size, and the string, and it automatically does what the Xcode best practice is of not specifying the extension or the @2x or 3x, right? It just references this directly, and so now you no longer have to remember that. Which, when you get into larger applications, right, you can have several hundred or even thousands of images that this lets you quickly get to the ones you want without having to figure out exactly what the file name is. One caveat to this, though, is it doesn't work as I originally expected it to work, where I could start typing like this. You actually have to start without the ampersand, and it'll auto-insert that information for you. So that's kind of just a little idiosyncrasy of how that works. So those two are some of the plugins that I really like. Jumping back to the plugin manager, that was plugins. The other one that we just talked about with colors and themes, really important here that you pick one that works well for you. Let's say you're a big Harry Potter fan. I'll install it, reinstall it again. You want to have a theme that works for you, and there's a lot of work that people already put into themes, so you don't have to do the work yourself again. So let me open that project back up, bring up the preferences again, fonts and colors, and you'll notice now there's a Harry Potter color, right? And so this may work out really well for you. There's dozens and dozens of default themes out there that again, you want to find one that works, that is the easiest on your eyes, right, and best to use. So that's themes. Let me bring up package manager again. The last one, which is actually probably a little bit more of an advanced topic, but can save you a lot of time, is templates. Now, this is something that tutorial team member Joshua Green shared with me. He actually uses a template of OCMock and Expecta, which are two iOS frameworks, right, for creating unit test cases, where you can actually a template. Let me show you what templates are exactly. So anytime you come into File New, these are all templates, right? These are a pattern for a definition of a file, right? There's a common way that Cocoa Touch classes are defined, that Playground's undefined, things like that. And so there are templates out there. Let's go down here, for example, to licensed. Let's say that you write a lot of open source software, and you're tired of copying and pasting the legal text and maybe some default methods, right? So if you install that, again, restart Xcode. Now, when you go to File New File, you'll notice I have a license template here, right? And it has I can give it a name, so I can say, my Open Table View controller, and I can pick my license, right? So you have a lot of functionality that templates can provide. Let me save that. And so you can see here default, right? I've got that legal text depending on the one I picked. Just one example of templates. There's lots. Like I said, Joshua Green uses it for unit test cases. This is actually really, really helpful for when you have multiple developers and you want a consistent way of your file types, right? Maybe you have properties at a certain location, or you have methods defined in a certain way. Templates can help you do that, right? There's lots in here for GHUnit, right, the predecessor to XCTest, which we can, it's the framework before XCTest because OCMock, right, wasn't as functionally equivalent. And there's a lot of other things in here, right? Singleton is a big issue. So that's a template for when you want to create files. The other thing you can do, which is not new to Xcode but doesn't also get a lot of usage, is called code snippets. So let me come over here and look for my wake from nib method. So code snippets, they're kind of little bite-sized pieces of code that are, you may reuse them often enough that you want to save a copy of them. Apple actually uses this for a ton of their demos, and what we mostly see, and I'll show you how to set it up here in a second, this was actually what they used primarily at WWDC this year. They've moved away from some of their third-party applications that did this to something built into Xcode. So they're kind of hidden over here under the utilities menu over here, and then this little block down here. There's some that come out of the box for Xcode. Most of them are pretty generic. So for example, you can just drag and drop them and put them in. So here's some sample code for enumerating, right? This would obviously go inside of a method for doing that. But one of them that's actually really useful is if you have a custom class, is called the isEqual code snippet. And this is really great because this is exactly how Apple wants us to check for equality in our classes, right? So you can check for what they want us to check for, and then in a custom class you have the opportunity to define your own comparison, and then also define your hash, right? That's unique to your instance. So those are the things that come out of the box. Now, the real power comes in when you create your own. So for example, let's say I reuse this awake from nib class or code a lot, right? Maybe several times throughout my application, and I want to make it easier so that my developers do it all in the same way. So you highlight a piece of code, you just drag it over to the code snippet section here. At the bottom it says my code snippet. So you can double click on it and click edit, and you can define your own kind of metadata around that code. So I'll call this the weather awake from nib, and I'm going to leave summary blank here, but the real powerful thing, and this is what we saw Apple doing, is you can put a shortcut in. So let's say I put in underscore WAFB, okay, for weather awake from nib. And the power, so I just click done, and now I can come anywhere in Xcode, and I can just type underscore W. You can see that I already indexed it. I just hit enter, and there's my code, right? So you figure you can do this for singletons. Let's say your company does singletons a certain way, or even if you have a client for a vendor that they want code done a certain way. Instead of having to memorize, right, their kind of coding styles, you may be able to leverage some of the built-in features like code snippets in Xcode to save you that burden. And the nice thing is, let's see if I can get there quickly. The nice thing is they're saved in the library folder. And so those of you who, I think, one or two versions back, Apple out of the box hid the library folder. So if you don't know, you can actually just hit the Option key. You can kind of see this library shows up. There is a plist terminal command you can do to always make it show, but generally, if you don't have access to modify the system, for example, if you have a corporate policy that denies that, you can also just do this quick little shortcut, which will get you there. Library, developer, Xcode, user data, down here at the bottom, code snippets. These are all the code snippets, right? This is the one we just created. Then you can share these, right? So if you have somebody drops it in theirs, they can get access to it as well. Real powerful, easy to use once you get set up, and allows for a lot of consistency. Really powerful stuff there in code snippets. So now the next section, let's look at some keyboard shortcuts. The first part's going to be around moving around Xcode. So let me hide this. Command 0 will open and close this left side. Command Shift 0 will open and command. There we go. Sorry. Command 0 will open and close the left side. Command Option 0, that's what I meant to say, will open and close the right side. Right. So that's the utility drawer. So you have some easy way to get to just your code. Likewise, you see the debugger tends to crop up when we don't really want it, and so that can be hidden with Command Shift Y. Right, Command Shift Y opens and closes it. A couple of the tutorial team members shared with you can remember it with Command Shift Y. Am I using this keyboard shortcut to open the debugger, or Command Shift Y is my code not working? Right. So a couple of the ways that you can remember that one. And so that's how you can kind of navigate around real quick. The other thing you can do is, let's say you're this happens to me quite often. Let's say you're looking at a class, something not working, and you want to really drill down into what's going on, right? So you kind of go through several classes. Let's say you're in NSString. Now you're in this class called City Weather, and you can kind of see the structure here, but maybe you don't know exactly where that is, or you don't want to go through the files. So what you can do is Command-Shift-J will actually show you that file in on the left side in the navigator. So this is really great, especially, like, again, for larger apps where you may have, I've seen up to maybe 7 or 8 layers deep in a folder structure, that this can jump you right to where you need to be, and you can see the .m and the .h. Right. Similarly, if you're on a particular class, Control Command up and down will either way will take you to the same place. Will take you between the .h and the .m. Right. On some Macs, you can also configure the multi-touch trackpad to do the same thing with 3-finger swipe. Mine is used for something else, so I can't show you that now, but that is definitely something that's to kind of save even the keystrokes. So then, last one here for moving around Xcode is the quick jump, right? So if I do Command-Option-J, let me see here. Let me do Command-Shift-O. Let me do that one instead. Quick Open. This is the Quick Open shortcut. Again, that was Command-Shift-O. This one's really popular for, let's say we want to filter on, I know I have a class that's called Weather Data, but I'm not sure what it's called. I can just start typing, and it shows me everything in Xcode that I can use, right? And then simply press Enter, and it jumps me right to there. The one that I really like to use, oops, sorry about that, is the Command-Option-J, which actually takes you down to this filter menu. So again, Command-Option-J, and you can see I can just start typing. So if I just want to do weather, it filters on everything there. Again, on a larger application, this one becomes really useful to me when I can, so you can see everything that has to do with weather data. All right, so a couple of those for moving around Xcode. Now let's look at some of the shortcuts for working in Xcode. So first, the one that gets used a lot probably in some of the more advanced developers' workspaces is the code indentation, right? So let's say you can see here everything's kind of generally set. This looks to be about maybe 2 spaces away, indented about 2 spaces. You can also define that over here under text editing indentation. You can define a default value. Let's say your company's, for example, on rayrenderlook.com, we use 2 spaces, where here maybe my company uses 4. So what I can do is I can do Command-A to highlight all the code, and then you want to use Control-I, so not Command this time, Control-I, and it'll automatically arrange all the data. Oops, sorry, I guess this one's already done that. Let's see. There we go. So let's say I took all these spaces out. Sometimes this even happens in Xcode where it strips out your spaces. You can just highlight everything, again, Control-I, and it'll indent everything. This makes it a lot more readable. This is actually one of the things that was rumored about when Apple had that kind of go-to-fail bug earlier this year, that if they had done a lot of code indentation, they may have caught that. I don't know for sure. That's just one thing that really helps is to understand how your code is structured. The other thing, so breakpoints, right? Everybody loves to use breakpoints. You can actually do Command backslash. That's I'm on a MacBook Pro, so that's right below my delete key on the right side. Command backslash will add and remove them. So you don't have to leave your code. You can just go to, let's say, when I want to do a return, do a Command backslash, and it adds it there. The other thing that's really nice is historically in Xcode, we've had problems where the comment had to be on the leftmost side for Xcode to understand how to uncomment it. What would historically happen in Xcode 5 is if you tried to uncomment this, so you can do Command /, Xcode will uncomment that. What would happen before is it would end up doing another round of commenting, which is really not what we wanted. Xcode 6, this is actually significantly better, and they're smart about where your comment is, so everything can be uncommented at the same time. So this was a really nice one to see it included. All right, so a couple more here for the keyboard shortcuts. So what you can do, right? So let's say you have temperature. Let's just use multiple times. So you have temperature, right? You can do Command F to do a search, and it'll highlight everything, right? The other thing you can do, if you don't want to use the GUI, is you highlight the word, and you do Command E. That'll essentially do a search for it, and you use Command G to jump to all the other definitions of it. You can see it loops back around just exactly like a search does. So you can iterate through there again, so you can kind of see all the instances. Let's see. So the next one is Control 1. So use Command and 0 through N. Let's say this one has 8 options. So Command 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Over here, this bar, however, is accessed through Control. So if I do Control 1, that's this box here, right? And so what I can do is, and these are numbered, right? So again, 0, 1, 2, 1, 2. So 4 is this one here. So this would be that would be forward and backwards. So then 4 is this level. Again, I can do 5, which will take me to the class level. But the one I want to show you here is 6. And so this is actually the jump bar. It's called a jump bar for filtering to a specific method. So you can be on this class and just start typing. So you can see it starts filtering here, and then I can keep going, use my mouse keys, get to the one I want, and it'll take me right to that. Right, so real powerful there if you have a really long class methods. I've seen a couple classes that have 3,000 or 4,000 lines of code that a quick jump status would be really important to have. All right. So the last one here, it's not really a keyboard shortcut, but it's definitely something that's really helpful when you're duplicating code. Is if you want to grab this whole method, you put your mouse right here on this bracket, and you double click it, and it'll auto select down to its corresponding bracket and highlight it. So this is really great. Let's say you want to copy the switch case to something else. You can copy every instance of that. It works everywhere there's brackets. So it's really useful when you, like I said, when you want to get that whole method. The other one, which is a little bit more of an advanced feature, and depending on if you have your code aligned correctly, could work out, is if you hold the Option key while you're selecting. So for example, right, I can select this normally, but the Option key, you see this little crosshairs here? This will actually do what's called a column highlight. And so I can drag it here, and it'll highlight only the things in the column width of what I'm highlighting. To make it a little bit more obvious here, let me copy this here. See how it only does that right here? And so this is useful. Again, it's more of probably a fringe case, but if you have your code commented in such a way that maybe you have like text after each one, and these were a little bit shorter, right? You could come in here and highlight. There we go. You can come in here and highlight just the word text and delete it, right? So like say you want those two, and I can delete that. So it's a bulk delete. Kind of, again, a little fringe case, but it's nice to have. So the last thing we want to show here, I'm trying to be cognizant of time, is the schema management. It's pretty critical to Xcode, but it's usually misunderstood. And that's what you have your application up here. These are also called your scheme for running these targets. Apple defines a scheme as a collection of targets, configurations, and tests. That's a big piece to bite off. But really, schemes you can just think of them as used for either different versions of your applications or individual pieces of your application that you think should run separately. For example, one thing you could do is, let's say your company is real big about automated unit testing. Okay. You most likely don't want to put all of your unit test cases in the app you're going to ship to Apple. So what's common in a lot of places is you would create a new scheme based upon the existing scheme and just include the test cases, right? In this case, this target. So that you have access to all the same code of world weather, but you're adding additional functionality for the test. Another thing you'll see in just a little bit is we have different schemes for the app itself, and then for each individual framework we're using gets its own scheme. What I want to highlight here, though, is that you can do a lot of customizations here. So again, kind of like what we saw with the behaviors, for the particular action, you can set individual pieces of data. So for example, every time I run the simulator, let's say I want to be able to specify my language. In this case, the app only knows about English. But if I come back over here to my other application, this one here, and I go and do that, this app has been localized into multiple languages. So I can come over here and I can actually run the simulator with the localized language. New in Xcode 6, and we'll talk about this when we get to storyboards in just a minute, is double length. So it will actually take a word, let's say if you have hello world in it, it'll actually repeat that and say hello world, hello world. I'll show you that in just a second. The other thing is you can define a default location. Anywhere in the world, you can add a custom location if you need really specifics, or if you're supporting iOS's like geofence locations, you can do that here, or there's some default ones that you can include. So real quick blurb about that. The other thing you can do in schemes, which is important, is your currency formatting. That's your application region and your language combinations. The currency formatting really important if you're dealing with numbers, right? Some places use commas, other places use periods for the same symbols. So that's really important to test and make sure you have that done correctly. Again, this is where you may be familiar with zombies, from back in the day doing memory allocation. Zombies is defined here under diagnostics. All right, so that's a bunch of the Xcode 6. That's a bunch of the Xcode general functionality. Let me go back to my obligatory next slide. And let's talk about Xcode 6. So two things I want to talk about here. Two big things, live view debugging and Swift playgrounds. We'll talk about asset catalogs and storyboards improvements as well. Let me get back to Xcode. Try to go through these pretty quickly. If I run this application in my...
I think screen sharing got turned off, Chris.
Oh yeah, I see my light came back. All right. Sorry about that. 1 second. Let me get it loaded again. I'll turn it back on. All right, we should be back now.
Yep, I see it. Thanks.
Cool. Sorry about that. Okay, so I've got the view running. I've got the app running in the simulator. Again, this is just a sample app. I can view different cities. Dallas. This is the weather in Dallas right now. So one of the things, if you guys have played around with the app called Reveal, it came out about a year ago or so, I think. That made a lot of waves in the iOS community because you could actually do some what Apple calls live view debugging, and go in to what's actually happening in your application and see how that's running. Xcode 6 introduces that. I would consider this version 1.0 for Apple, primarily because what this does is this actually takes a snapshot. So you'll see here the app is actually paused while it does this. Reveal, however, is live, and you can actually manipulate it on the fly. I would expect this to come later with Xcode, but I don't know what Apple plans to do. I just know that would be something Reveal does benefit from. So again, the app is paused. If you haven't played around with live view debugging, I highly encourage it. You can twist the app, you can turn it. The really nice thing is you can separate out these layers, so you can see every layer of your UI. You see I have a navigation down here and some UI. You can also peel it back. So let's say I really need to get to this white screen and see what's going on there. I can peel this back. So that's from the back or from the front. Peel that back. There you go. And so now I can see the white screen, and I can see maybe if I have some content there that's hidden, that helps me to see that. This button right here in the middle kind of reorients everything. So let's say I get in a real dizzying state. I click on this, and it takes me right back to where I need to be. The other important piece for this is now under the debug navigator. Right, we have these. We have these. Can zoom in a little bit. We have these controls here. There we go. We have these controls here, but the other thing too is I can actually now show the view hierarchy. So if I do this, I can actually come in here and I can say, how is holding the Option key? I can. Xcode's not wanting to play with me here. Holding the Option key, I can actually expand all the menus, so I can see exactly. You can see here it'll highlight those objects. So this one is blank right now, but I can see kind of the host that's right there. I can see my window. Let me expand that one so you can see this better. You can see all your options and your constraints, right? So really, really powerful for debugging. If something's going on, you can see the exact location of what's happening, especially with your constraints, right? You can say this is 300 by 300 for the iPhone 6. Maybe it's supposed to be 200 by 200, and that's the problem, right? So this lets you do a lot of that debugging.
Hey, Chris, just wanted to chime in. It's a 5-minute warning.
Sure. All right, cool. Appreciate it. Let's see. All right, so then let's jump over to the sample application from the Xcode 6 chapter. Do this. I'll jump over to Swift. Well, let's take a quick look at Swift Playgrounds. Jump in here. Jump into this app. Let me stop the other one. There we go. All right, so if I come over here, so this is a sample app that comes with the Xcode and Swift chapter. Basically, all it does is you select an image, and you can apply some Bezier path mask to it. But so the playground, we have a lot of that stuff implemented already, which is where you can do. Playgrounds are really great for doing kind of prototyping or sampling. If you don't want all the burden of having to create a class and define all your variables and all this kind of overhead that comes with, I just need to try something. Okay, so Playgrounds is kind of your answer for that. Everything runs sequentially, right? So from top to bottom, everything gets compiled. You can see everything running over here on the right side. And the great thing about Playgrounds is it tells me how many times it's run. Kind of using that eye icon again that we saw in the package manager, I can run this way, or clicking this, I can save a value to the timeline. And there's actually, let me switch to that timeline. There we go. Then there's actually quite a bit of elements that get saved to the timeline with this XCP capture value. So you can see there's all kinds of things. I can quickly capture what's happening with my class or with my code that I have, but without even having to even run the simulator. Right? I kind of get a quick view of that. So this is really powerful. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip some of this stuff here, but definitely check out the chapter in the book. Last thing I want to show you, two last things I want to show you real quick, is storyboard improvements. And so this actually got a lot of feedback from the tutorial team, both from Ricardo Cepeda and Andy Pereira showed me some of these great things here. One of the things, one of the enhancements in general is to the assistant editor. Assistant editor is really great for bringing up things side by side. For example, you can bring up the corresponding code to a class. Right over here, you can use this little drop down, and I can say automatic, and it'll automatically find the code associated to this view. The other thing you can do now is I can come down here and do preview, and this got a lot better support in Xcode 6. So what I can do here is using this little plus, I can look at all the simulators my app supports. So I can add a 5.5, I can add an iPad, I can see everything at a glance for how it's going to, at least Xcode's closest representation of how it's going to run. As this stops zooming out, sorry, a little bit of a lag there. It's still zooming out. You can actually rotate it as well to landscape, and over here, this is where I can show you that that double pseudo language. If I show you, let's see, it'll be better. It'll be better in this other application. Once it stops zooming, there we go. Let me jump to this real quick. All right, so I can show you assistant. Again, use this little drop down here. You can select preview, which will show you the UI preview. And actually, Xcode is going in and recompiling your app to run on this. So you just select a view, and it shows you how you're running. You get over here to this one here. So city name, right? If I select this pseudo language of double length, you'll see city name, city length. This is really powerful for if you're going to support languages like German that are very long. You can see how your constraints will react, right? Whether it's doing the name spacing or it's doing ... if that's what you want, right? That kind of thing. Two other things here real quick. You can set a global tint color. So over here you select the storyboard. Over here you select the storyboard. Under this first tab here, down over here, you can set global tint. So this is really great if you have a company standard, let's say for a color you want to do, and you have a flow using a storyboard, you set this global tint, and all of your UI controls, from your labels to your navigation controllers to your segmented controllers, will all get this global tint. Anything set on UI appearance. So really powerful there that you can do. So I know we're about out of time. If I can, Ray, can I just have a few more minutes?
Sure, but try to make it pretty quick as we do have some Q&A we want to get through.
Okay, cool. So last thing I want to show you then real quick is actually loading, through the iOS simulator, loading some images. So if you come here, right, so let me bring back our simulator. Bring this one here, run this. So so this loads some images, right? Let's say I have an image I want to load. And not just images, actually, let me clarify. Anything you need to get to the simulator is actually super easy through the command line. So the first thing you want to do is get to that application. It's called sim control, simulator control. So cd applications xcode.app content developers. I know I'm going pretty fast here, so I'm trying to just get through it. This is the path, right? This is where all of our applications live. So what you do is sim control list. So this will show you all of your simulators and its UUID and its current status, right? So you can see this one's booted. iPhone 6 is booted because I'm running it. So what I can do is I can actually just do again /sim control. I can do. Let me save this one here. Do that one. You want to make sure it's booted. So I'm going to do add photo. What you can do instead is boot, and then your UID. And I'm going to just grab a picture off my desktop. And it's called Fluffy Cat. So I'm going to do that there. And so now if I come over here and I add this picture, this is the Fluffy Cat I just added. So I ran through this before, that's why you see two of them. But so now this is how you can access it. Again, not just images, you can do anything for whether it's PDFs or documents or keys or a SQL database, anything like that. Last thing I want to show you is this toggle slow animations. Really, really powerful if you need to track how something's working, right? So you can see, okay, maybe I have something animating in and I want to switch to that, or I can see how this modal is doing, right? If I have things fading out, real powerful there. Again, this is just on the debug menu, slow animations. So I appreciate you hanging out with me here. So let me jump back to these slides. Basically, so that's what we have to go through so far. I'll try to post some slides later if we can. With some other notes, but otherwise I'll be around. Do want to give a huge shout out to the team though that provided the feedback, and thank you all for listening. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Ray.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. That was awesome. I learned a lot, and I can't wait to try out some of these things myself, actually. So great job, packed full of content. It was awesome. So thanks again, and we're going to open things up to Q&A now. So feel free to keep any questions you have coming and any upvotes coming as well, and we'll be going through in rough order of upvotes. So the first question we're going to take is by Robert Brown, and it's, will there be a cheat sheet of some of these Xcode tips published on the site? And I'm actually going to take this one, Chris.
Yeah.
So first of all, everybody who's listening, you should know about this tutorial by Jack Wu that came out earlier this year. It's called Supercharging Your Xcode Efficiency. And it has a lot of these tips and tricks in there, so I definitely recommend you check that out. In addition to that, if it's good with you, Chris, I'll take Chris's notes and just paste them to the show notes of this website, to our website when we post this video up as well. And we'll do the slides. Does that sound good, Chris?
Yeah. So I know we went through that pretty fast, so I think there's a lot of stuff that you guys would love to come back and take a look at.
Okay, so yeah, that should cover it between Jack's tutorial and the notes we'll be putting up with this video. The next is actually a couple comments from some of they're not questions, but comments just for people to know. There's a couple of plugin suggestions from Alcatraz. One of them is called Fuzzy Autocomplete, and this is suggested by Natalia Osa, who says that with Fuzzy Autocomplete, you can actually type in the middle of a method and autocomplete will suggest all the methods. So that's one handy one to know about. And I think there was another one. There's one suggested by Akal Agrawal, who says that Uncrustify is another good plugin for cleaning up indentation issues, especially in larger team projects, and it's also a plugin you can get via Alcatraz. And I believe there was one more. Yes, from John Clem. He recommends XCS Code Switch Expander as another good Alcatraz plugin. So those are all ones to recommend. And actually, I have a question for you, Chris. Are there any other plugins, now since we're on the subject right now, that people should know about, but other than the ones you've already mentioned?
There is. There's one other one I would add, and forgive me, I don't remember the name off the top of my head. It's something around sort and order, I think is what it's called. There's a line prefix in there, but great thing about the package manager is you can type anywhere in the name and it'll find it. Something about sort and order, and what this does is actually really nice. If you add a whole bunch of properties, let's say you have 10 properties for a class, this little plugin that gets dropped in will actually, you can run a service on your properties that will automatically order them either alphabetically or by content type, and indents them properly. So it's a real quick way to kind of add some code readability that's really doesn't take any time to do.
Okay, awesome. I have another tiny question, Chris. I noticed you were in the preview assistant editor, looking at like the iPad and iPhone and a couple other devices, and you were zooming in and out. How do you zoom in and out with that thing?
Sure. So I'm on my MacBook Pro, so you can actually just do the pinch and zoom, just like you do for your your phone, and actually zoom in and out on the preview. That also works on storyboards as well. Doesn't work in nibs, unfortunately, but those two, assistant and storyboards, works really well in.
Do you know what with a regular keyboard and mouse what it would be? The scroll view, the middle mouse button doesn't seem to do it for me.
I don't, off the top of my head. I've got for my iMac, I have a Magic Trackpad, but I can look that up and get back to you guys on that.
Okay. All right. Let's see. What other questions do we got here?
Chris, I had a quick question about Alcatraz again, speaking of plugins. How is the support in Xcode? I know it's sort of an unofficial addition to Xcode, and are there any like stability issues, or what happens if a plugin is incompatible and Xcode won't start or something? Have you run into any issues with that?
So I've not run into issues with Xcode not starting. I have run into issues with compatibility. Essentially, what happens is if it's a contained plugin, it just doesn't run, right? So you kind of select it and nothing happens. It's not. So kind of to your first point, it's not something that's open by Apple, right? Inherently, their Xcode platform, like the rest of their ecosystem, is very closed and self-contained. So they've kind of done. I would consider it maybe a backdoor kind of reverse engineering, looking at how this actually came from how Interface Builder used to talk to Xcode back when they were standalone applications, and so Alcatraz kind of does very similar work in injecting into Xcode.
Okay, the next question is by Dev Chuo, and he says, when you're doing JSON parsing in Swift, do you recommend using the generic Apple JSON, NSJSON serializer classes, or do you recommend external frameworks like SwiftJSON?
So that's actually a really great question, because that was probably one of the first things that got developed for Swift. I think after Apple announced it was, wow, JSON support is really terrible, at least in my opinion. So what I can show you actually, I'm going to try to share my screen real quick. I'll show you if you haven't done JSON work yet. Let me show you this real quick. I'll show you this class that we had to do, right? So when we did the cookie cutter class, I had to do a lot of JSON work. So in here, let's see. Okay, so it's going to be in here. So this JSON work. So this method right here, all of this right here is just to simply get. You have to iterate through every dictionary and then every array, and then go through each value in your content just to get the JSON values out, right? Where that kind of, I think, got let us down in from what we carried over from Objective-C. So I personally would recommend Swiftly JSON because it encapsulates a lot of that work. You just pass in the key you want in Swiftly JSON, and it'll give you that object back.
Okay, awesome.
Hey Chris, I got one for you.
Sure.
Back on the Xcode plugins and Alcatraz, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you have any recommendations to where to go to find resources on how to develop your own plugins?
I do. I know I used to have a tab for it. I'm not sure I still have it up. I'll make sure. I'll get with Ray after and make sure. There's actually a handy tutorial that somebody else did, so maybe that's even something that we can do on our site for creating your own. It's a little bit treading into unmapped territory, but it definitely helps if you can get there. So again, I don't have that right offhand, but I have come across tutorials that help you do that.
Okay, cool. I have one tip too that I wanted to inject. When creating snippets in Xcode for your macros or whatever, there's a syntax you can use to make those placeholder things that you're familiar with if you've ever used a default Xcode snippet.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And that's less than hash placeholder name and then hash greater than, or either way, angle brackets enclosing it.
Open and close.
So I just wanted to point that out, and you can even use that in the editor, live editor. So if you want to have placeholders for copy pasting things, it's kind of handy.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So I know that's a lot of how the templates work. And I think templates and code snippets are very similar, right? One's a file versus a code snippet, but that's great that they can come over as well.
Okay, the next question is from Samuel Hobeka, and he says, can you give us a link to the SimControl app? So Chris, you and I should just make sure that the post has a link to where that is. Let me post that up. And the last question I have is actually from me, Chris, and it's not related to your presentation, but while we have you here, I thought it would be interesting to ask, and it's just out of curiosity. I know you work at USAA, you're the lead tech developer there, and I'm wondering what your guys' take is on Swift so far, and are you guys using it? Are you kind of waiting and seeing? What are you doing with Swift so far?
Sure. So it definitely caused a lot of consternation when Apple developed it on what are we going to do. We have some efforts in flight right now to kind of modernize our application, and we're kind of using it as a test bed to try out migrating some of our functionality over to Swift. So we're definitely adopting it. Some of our more senior developers are kind of leading that charge. It's not a full-on migration, we know. So we've got north of 20 iOS developers, and I would say only a fraction of them are actually get to work on it every day and learn Swift and all that stuff, right? So there's definitely a need for us to still support Objective-C, but we're not ignoring Swift, right? So we're actively working on it and finding the its rough edges, but the general guidance still is where it makes sense.
Okay. Well, thank you. So unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today, so we're going to have to wrap it up here. But before we go, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Chris. That was an awesome tech talk, chock full of content. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot.
Cool. Well, I had a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody hanging out and asking the questions. And again, to all the guys who asked questions, I'll work with Ray so we can get a lot of your questions answered. Since there was a lot of content, we went through very quickly.
Okay, so if you enjoyed this tech talk, don't forget to sign up for our conference, RW DevCon. You'll get to level up your iOS skills, and through a combination of hands-on tutorials and tech talks, we're going to have tracks for complete beginners and also for advanced developers, and we'll be covering subjects like auto layout, adaptive UI, scene kit, debugging, metal, and a whole lot more. So it should be a lot of fun. So it's at rwdevcon.com, and hopefully we will see you there. And last but not least, we have these tech talks every month, so we'll be announcing the next tech talk soon. Just look for a note on the sidebar of our site like usual. And thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tech talk, and we'll see you next time. Bye.